Good day and welcome to Excelsior Classes monthly content expert webinar series. We are so glad you could join us live or by recording. It is April of 2019 and this evening we are hearing a presentation from our newest math teacher, Mrs. Judy Frank. Judy is coming to us live from Canada this evening. And I find it very interesting that Judy holds many degrees. She's a lifelong learner, and some of her degrees include degrees in advanced mathematics, but also degrees in psychology and mediation. So I think that she is the perfect one to be speaking to us tonight about how and why students should learn algebra and how they can even like it. We're excited to have her come on this fall to teach many classes, and we'll talk about those at the end. But for now, I want you to just sit back and enjoy the presentation, and I will turn it over to Judy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie. Hi, everyone. My name is Judy Frank, and I teach math with Excelsior Classes. In particular, tonight, I'd like to talk to you about algebra. Why students need it, why everyone needs it, and that everyone can do it, and people do like it. So let's get started. Julie, next, please. We do algebra every single day, every single one of us. So for example, here is the perfect example of us doing algebra. As adults, when we go to the store to buy something, or when we're figuring out a dinner, something like that, we don't actually define our variables, such as P equals the number of students, number of people, and Z equals the number of pizzas. Instead, we would do something like this. I want to have some people over for pizza. I only have $34. So if each pizza costs $10, that means I can buy 3 pizzas. Now, if every pizza has 8 slices, and I expect that every single person will eat 3 of those slices, that means that if I buy 3 pizzas, I'll have 24 slices. So with everybody eating 3 slices, I can invite 8 people for my pizza dinner, and everybody will have enough pizza. So that's an example of algebra. We do it every day, every single day, every adult. At the bottom of this slide, it's a more formal kind of algebra where the variables are defined, there are equal signs, and it's worked out so that you actually get an answer. But whether it's presented as algebra or whether it's just presented as I presented it to you, thinking about having a pizza party, it's algebra. We all do it. Next, please. So algebra is actually a really necessary life skill. I just showed you an example of how we use it every day. As parents, we use it to budget all the time. How much can we afford and how much do we have to buy? The artists use it when they have to buy supplies. Farmers will use it to figure out crops, animals, how much machinery they could get. Students who want to go to post-secondary education, whether they're going for a science or engineering or medical type of field, or whether they're going for humanities or arts, all these post-secondary students, all these people whose goal it is to go to post-secondary will benefit from knowing algebra as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that in just a few minutes. Next, please. All right, so here's a proof. Why do students need algebra? This little proof here, it doesn't actually look like something that anybody would need. We start at the top defining that x is equal to y, and then we follow all of the algebra rules perfectly. What we do to one side, we do to the other. So for example, in the second step, we multiplied x on both sides, so we get x squared is equal to xy, and we Then the next step is we factor and we divide by x minus y on both sides. And we keep going through this little proof, doing all of the rules correctly. And then at the bottom, we see that we've got 1 is equal to 0. What? There is nowhere in math that 1 is equal to 0. There was nowhere, period, where 1 is equal to 0. So what's happened? We followed all these rules. We've done everything algebraically according to the rules, but still we get 1 is equal to 0. So what's going on with that? Well, it has to do with critical thinking. Next, Julie, please. So this is one of the reasons why it's especially good for all students to take algebra, whether they're going into a science-related field or anything else. Even if they don't expect to use algebra, algebra does teach you how to think critically and think logically. And that's really important. One of the things that I talk about with my students a lot is, does that make sense? Is that reasonable? So in the proof that we saw just previous to this, it isn't reasonable that 0 should equal 1. And students should, from algebra, should start to think about, is that reasonable? And I think that algebra's contribution to critical thinking is just that. Ask if it's reasonable. And when you ask if things are reasonable, and this extends to everything, is it reasonable for me to pay $5 for 5 pencils that are 10 cents each? Yet, you know, we all shop and we've all been to the cash register when the person working the cash register has made that mistake. You need to be able to say, is that reasonable? So, Julie, can we just go back to the proof slide again? And I'll just show you what the mistake is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down, it says divide by x minus y. If you notice, we said that x is equal to y. So x minus y will end up being 0. Okay? You can substitute an x in for that y, or you can substitute a y in for that x. It doesn't matter. They are equal. So x minus y will equal 0. And one thing you learn in algebra is that you can't divide by 0. It's undefined. So a student doing this proof, if they just went through and did all those little rules, they might get 1 equals 0. If they were watching carefully, or if they got 1 equals 0, and they said to themselves, that's not reasonable, and went through it again, they might find that mistake. The x minus y equals 0 because x equals y. So that's why that is. It doesn't really, 1 doesn't really equal 0. Next, please. Okay, and so this is the main point that I like to talk to students about when we're doing algebra. Is it reasonable? Is it reasonable for you to think that? And hopefully they carry that through their lives. Next, please. So one other way that I try to encourage students to understand that algebra is everywhere, and why do they need to learn it, is by giving them a project. And this is an example of a project. They're asked to plan a party, and I give them some parameters. So they have to invite a certain minimum amount of people. They have to buy a certain number of things. So for example, balloons, cakes, drink, like some water, and like water, juice, pop. So they have to spread their money out. I give them a budget. So, and I ask them to do it on a wiki. So it's fun. Students like wikis. They like to put the pictures in and be creative. So this project allows students to just be as creative as they possibly can, do whatever they like. It's a party. They can do whatever kind of party they would like, but they need to They need to stay within the budget I gave them. They need to have at least those minimum number of people, and they need to get at least the supplies I asked them to. On each page of the wiki, they are asked to put a small equation. Something like, if I expect 10 people to come and they're going to each eat 1 piece of cake and 3 pieces of pizza, how is that going to set up? So you might say X is equal to cake and P is equal to pizza, and go and make some equations from there. So I asked students to do this, and from this, they learn that, oh my goodness, I'm already using algebra, in fact, because I have to figure things like this out. Anyways, in my parents will say, you know, you've got to make a decision about what kind of treat you might like to have, and this is how much money you have. So already, I'm going to be making that kind of a decision. So students will recognize that they're using algebra, and they will hopefully enjoy it more and see the usefulness of it. Next, please. I'm just going to plug my computer in. Oh, sorry about that. All right. Okay, and so the last thing I want to say, and perhaps the most important, you know, I talk to parents all the time who say, I was just never very good at math. I was never very good at algebra. You know, I don't know what I really needed it for, but I was never very good at it. And, you know, I think when kids hear their parents say things like that, they kind of take that attitude on as well. You know, my parents aren't that good at algebra, and, you know, they don't really see all those examples of us using algebra every single day. They don't recognize it's algebra. And so they decide, well, you know, who is good at this? Not many people. And I think all of us have sat in a class where we know who the smartest kid is, and all the rest of us are just, you know, floating along. So one of the most important reasons to take algebra, for students to take algebra and for them to enjoy it, is that they will gain confidence. You know, when you move from arithmetic to algebra, all of a sudden you're confronted with brackets and exponents and putting things in the correct order for calculation. It's just a whole bunch of extra stuff, and it can be frustrating and it can be scary. But you know, when you break it down and students learn piece by piece how to deal with each of those things, all of a sudden you see smiles. They're so happy they can do it. Look at this complex equation, and I know how it works. And that gives them confidence. And you know, as someone who actually in junior high really was not doing very well, you know, I know that feeling of, oh, you know what, I can't do this, I'm no good at it. But you know, I also know that with the right help and with hard work, because there is homework, students can learn it. And when you do learn it, so I always say in my first math degree, the most important thing I learned in my first math degree was that I can do it. If I persevere, I can solve all of these problems. So that's what I learned from doing math. And I hope to give that to all of the students that I teach too. Not only that algebra is important, but more importantly, that you can do it. You can do it. Everyone can. Thank you. Oh, and these are just some further reading if you would like it.
Thank you very much, Judy. Does anybody have any questions for Judy before she gets ready to close things out? We are very happy to have you ask anything you might be considering. One thing I will ask, Judy, how, you know, a lot of times I am a homeschool parent myself, I know you are as well. If a student comes into say Excelsior Classes or a math program in general, but maybe particularly ours, how do you really know exactly what level that student is at? Because they may have been taking math from different venues or maybe using a different curriculum. So how would I go about placing my student in making sure they're prepared for math?
I've posted with each class, I've posted a readiness assessment. So if you're thinking about registering your student with Excelsior Classes Math, please go ahead and get your students to do the readiness assessment. And not just the one you think might be the one to do, but for example, if you're thinking about pre-algebra, do the essentials for pre-algebra, the one below, as well as the one above, the algebra one.
Okay.
And ask your student to show all of his or her work so that...
So you make sure they do it.
Well, you know, because then if the student is really close to the score that I think would be okay for him or her to enter the class, I can take a look at that work and I can see exactly what the mistake was.
Okay.
And I can either advise on how to get rid of that mistake over the summer, or whether that mistake is the result of a lot of different things that were kind of missed. And in that case, you know, you can still, I call them holes. So sometimes people have holes in their knowledge. And that means for math that the next thing that you do is going to be really difficult because you're missing the thing that you needed to do before. And so, show me the work, and I'll send you an email and we can talk about it. But please do those readiness assessments because they are the first step for you to really get a good feel of how your student might fit in with the Excelsior Classes math classes.
Okay, that sounds good. And we do have another question. It's on, I think this is the question, but
yeah, I'd like to ask Judy. Judy, how do you feel about the use of calculators? Are they possibly overused? Is there a place for them? What do you think?
So at the levels that I'm teaching right now, so for the essentials for pre-algebra and pre-algebra, I prefer that students use a pencil and paper. If you, here where I live, in elementary school, they started giving students calculators in grade 3. And that meant that, we have a whole group of students, a whole cohort that doesn't really know how to multiply or divide, and certainly doesn't know how to do square root. So there is a place for calculators, and in the algebra class and higher, students need to learn how to use a calculator, because if you're going on especially to do physics or chemistry, the point behind those classes is not math. The point behind those classes is something else. And so you don't want to have to trudge through all these decimals and scientific notation all by yourself, all by hand. You want to just put it into a calculator and get the answer. But when we're learning math, I ask students to do it pencil and paper. I want to see their work. I want to know that they actually understand how to do it. In particular, there's the graphing calculators that are out now, and so I also tutor adults at a post-secondary education, and it's interesting to see that many adults cannot graph without that calculator. They don't know how to plot on a graph with a pencil and a paper. So yeah, I know. So it's really important that students understand these things before they start off with the calculator. The calculator is your tool. It should not be the thing that is actually doing the thinking for you.
Good, thank you. Any other questions before we wrap up? And I do want to say, if anybody's typing in any questions, please continue. I did want to say a special welcome to Susan Gleason, our German teacher, and Lisa Rourke, who would be teaching in the fall. She's our new, one of our new teachers as well, and she's doing a career development class and an intro to psychology class. So I'm glad to have both of them here tonight as well. Looks like I don't see any more questions in the chat bar. So I think for now, Judy is off the hook, although I was very inspired, and actually I have an 11-year-old son who's just getting into algebra, so I would have to vouch for you. He's very proud when he can say, you know, G to the second plus F to the third, and, you know, he reads off these sentences, and he feels like he's big time because he knows what that is. So
it's amazing. It's an amazing feeling.
yeah.
Yeah.
So very cool. Well, now this fall you'll be offering several courses revolving around algebra. You have Essentials for Pre-Algebra, then Pre-Algebra, Algebra, and Geometry, and then a specialized study that's one-on-one. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
It's an independent study. If you think that your student may not be quite ready for one of these, or perhaps you'd like to slow it down a little bit or speed it up a little bit, we can tailor that specialized. It's an independent study, so we can tailor it to the student and have them be where you'd like them to be.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And if anybody has any further questions, or anybody who's watching this by recording, if you have any questions, you can certainly feel free to contact Judy at Excelsior Classes, Judy Frank at excelsiorclasses.com. And I know that she'll be happy to speak with you by email or phone. So
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I would encourage everyone, if you are able to, next month, it'll be our last Content Expert webinar series officially of the school year. We may hold some over the summer, but next month we'll be hearing from our own Jody Guerra, who's doing a Mom's Professional Development Night. And so that should be a very interesting topic, especially as people are thinking about what they're doing over the summer. And even, I know a lot of parents are planning now for what their students will be doing in the fall. So that will be a great one to check out as well. So we thank you very much for coming. Thank Judy again. And I hope that tonight you were encouraged about algebra and learned something, or were encouraged in some way for your students. So thank you, and we hope everybody will join us again soon. Wish you all a good night and a happy Easter this week.